And so I woke up the next morning and I talked to my wife, Amy, and said, honey, I have to do something different. And she said, well, Eric, you've been talking about doing something different for the last couple of years. What would you do? And I described this consulting business and how I would take what I do to other people around the country, but I'd have control over my time and I could be there for her when I needed to be there for her and the kids and do other things that I needed to do. And I wouldn't have to be on call 24/7. She said, well, that sounds great. What is stopping you? And I said, honey, when am I going to have time to start a business? I've got this and I've got this, and all the excuses poured out. And it was just a story I was telling myself. And she cut through it all in one statement. I will never forget the moment that she looked at me and said, Eric, have you ever thought that maybe you need to quit your day job so you have time to start a business?
You made that term, burn the boats, and it's so true. It's like you just have to cut the ties, and there is no other option, right? At that point, you're like, there's no other option but for me to be successful. So I'm sorry to cut in there, but I want to make that point. It's funny because you get to this point where you're like leading up to it, and then you hit the go button, and it's like most people just never look back.
Unfinished Business Podcast Show with your host, David Sliman.
Welcome back to Unfinished Business, everybody. Listen, we're diving in today to the powerful intersection of purpose, science, entrepreneurship. And our guest today is Eric Collett, the founder of A Mind for All Seasons. This guy is a visionary behind this format called Enhanced Protocol. We're going to talk more about that. But we're going to talk about brain health. Brain health, understanding the approach to brain health, managing really your brain, your cognitive functions, and optimizing your brain performance. We're also going to touch on his background on Alzheimer's, dementia, which I know is a big topic these days, and his path into entrepreneurship. It's going to be a great show. So sit back, relax, and really take this one in. It's going to be a powerful interview, and we're going to talk about really manifesting and really putting in your cognitive functions and translating that into a positive system and keeping your sharpness, really. I mean, that's what it comes down to. I've been asked these questions a lot on how do you maintain optimal performance? How do you keep your brain going? I mean, listen, we all get tired. We have all these things coming at us day in and day out. And we're going to talk about the clinical approach. We're going to talk about the practical approach. We're going to talk everything that he does. And I can't wait to dive in. I'm going to be such a student today in understanding really Eric's experience and his approach to become more optimal. So I can't wait to jump into this. So without further ado, Eric Collett, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, David. I've been excited for this conversation. Good to be with you.
I'm really looking forward to diving into this. And I got to tell you, everybody, when I met with Eric, I mean, we immediately hit it off. But one of the questions he asked me that I thought was so fantastic was, how do I make this the best show that you've done? And I got to tell you, this is going to be one of the best shows because he is genuine, he's educated, and more importantly, he puts people first. I could tell this from the beginning, and you're going to hear about his background and his story about entrepreneurship, but I can't wait to dive into this. So Eric, let's do it, man. Let's jump in.
Great.
All right. So let's back up. I want our guests to hear the journey about your steps into entrepreneurship and your background and what's gotten you to this point today, at least. I know it's a broad question, but let's talk about the beginnings here.
Yeah. So I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. My dad started a business when I was just a baby, and he owned it, ran it for 40 years, and then sold it to a brother who's kept it going for many years since. And so we talked about building business around the dinner table. And a lot of my four brothers are entrepreneurs. So it's a thing that's been in our blood for a long time. But I spent 16 years working in and running assisted living and memory care communities. and developed some powerful tools that we had a lot of success with. And that led to opportunities to go consult and teach in other places. And I recognized that there was a need for some of the skills that I had developed. And I was telling myself a story for a long time, which was, I am too busy to start a business. I was on call 24/7. I have 4 children, and my wife and I were just busy raising the kids and doing all of those family kinds of things. And so I had in my mind that, when am I ever going to moonlight and get something started and move forward? Well, things kind of came to a head in about 2015.
Okay.
When my wife, who has a relatively uncommon eye disease that robs a person of peripheral vision and makes them totally blind at night, unfortunately had to take herself off the road because her vision was getting worse. And she was down to about a 10-degree visual field. So that's like looking through paper tubes or something, and not a safe situation for a driver. So there I was, the sole driver in the family, and on call 24/7, running this busy memory care community, and involved in community and civic events and doing all sorts of things. So I was kind of stretched to the max. And I was also 30 pounds overweight. I hadn't read anything in a long time, which is totally unlike me. I was not living my best life, even though on the surface, from what other people could see, I was having a lot of success. I was running a community in a really difficult profession where we had a waiting list that sometimes was as long as 18 or 20 people. So there was demand for what we were doing. But there I was one evening, driving the family to the school play for my little girl, and the phone rang. And it was one of the team members there in that memory care community. And she said, "Eric, we need you." I said, "Well, what's going on? I'm on the way to the school play." She said, "Eric, so-and-so," referencing one of our female residents, "is actively dying." And I said, "What?" This lady was on hospice services, but we didn't expect her to start actively dying for months. And something had turned, and her family was there. They were in distress. They needed love and support. And I was the only guy that could really do that at that point. It was after hours. The staff were busy. They were doing things, getting residents ready for bed. So anyway, dropped off the family. I didn't even know how they were going to get home. And I spent the 15 minutes driving to my office feeling like the worst husband and father imaginable. And then I got to the community, and I spent the next few hours trying to support that family, but actually feeling like the lousiest executive director on the planet, because I didn't want to be there. I was conflicted. I actually just wanted to be at the school play, and I was resenting being there. And then I felt bad about resenting that. And, this is not a good headspace. So I got home that night after everybody had gone to bed, and I looked in the mirror and I realized, I hardly recognize you. You're going to die an early death if you keep this up. Your stress level is absolutely maxed out. You have to do something different. And I think a lot of us on the entrepreneurial journey have been at a point like that where something has to change. And this was that moment for me. And so I woke up the next morning and I talked to my wife, Amy, and said, "Honey, I have to do something different." And she said, "Well, Eric, you've been talking about doing something different for the last couple of years. What would you do?" And I described this consulting business and how I would take what I do to other people around the country, but I'd have control over my time, and I could be there for her when I needed to be there for her and the kids, and do other things that I needed to do. And I wouldn't have to be on call 24/7. She said, "Well, that sounds great. What is stopping you?" And I said, "Honey, when am I going to have time to start a business? I've got this and I've got this," and all the excuses poured out. And it was just a story I was telling myself. And she cut through it all in one statement. I will never forget the moment that she looked at me and said, "Eric, have you ever thought that maybe you need to quit your day job so you have time to start a business?" And that's when I just kind of sat back, and it was like the heavens parted and
everything
light poured out. And it was like, whoa, why have I not seen that before? And I realized if she had the courage to support me in giving up the W-2 comfort zone, then I could have the courage to give that up. And
Yes.
the interesting thing is, I told myself that my parachute was my administrator's license, that I was in demand, that people needed those individuals who had the skills and experience that I had. And if this entrepreneurial journey didn't work, that I'd just go back to doing what I was doing. And then probably 6 months in, I woke up and realized, oh my goodness, I'm in trouble because I burned the boats. Like, I learned so much in that first 6 months about myself. And I mean, I had to start prioritizing my health. I had to get to a better place. I had to start applying things that I've known. And I got to such a different place that I realized I can never go back. This is do or die because I've changed too much. And I don't know about you, David, but I think a lot of entrepreneurs get to that moment where they realize I kind of like living without the ceiling.
Yes. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
There's
You made
a
that
false
term,
sense of
burn the
comfort.
boats. Sorry to cut in, but you made that term, burn the boats. And it's so true. It's like you just have to cut the ties, and there is no other option, right? At that point, you're like, there's no other option but for me to be successful. So I'm sorry to cut in there, but I want to make that point. It's funny because you get to this point where you're like leading up to it, leading up to it, leading up to it. And then you hit the go button, and it's like most people just never look back. And I love that story, but keep going. I'm sorry to cut in on you. I
No,
had to make that point.
I think that's an important point. I think it was Tony Robbins that first talked about the idea of burning the boats, but I think it's an apt metaphor. And the other thing that I realized is that I had a false sense of security. As I became more engaged in the entrepreneurial journey, I came to realize that in my previous job, I was actually dependent on other people to make a lot of right decisions for me to continue having the job that I had.
What a
And things
perspective.
had lined up and things were going well, but I was also living with a ceiling. I was actually topped out in my career. I could have been some sort of regional director with the company that I was with, or I could have gone to another company. And I was absolutely not interested in what that would mean. And so I was kind of at the top of the pay scale, and
Yeah.
I couldn't go any further.
Yeah.
And once I became an entrepreneur, I realized I can pivot as many times as I want to, and as many times as the market sends a signal that something different is needed, or as many ways as I want to keep growing. And I love the fact that there's no ceiling. I can grow this as big as I want to. And our mission right now, Out of Mind for All Seasons, is to save the next million brains by 2030.
Yeah. That's great.
And then we're going to save millions
This
more after that. People
is great.
absolutely need help to get their brains to a better place because we live and work in a knowledge economy. Most of us aren't learning. We're not out there earning our way through brute force labor. It's our brains that are our tools. And if we keep them as sharp as possible, we just do better work, and
Yeah.
it's easier. Dull knives don't cut very well.
We're going to pivot into this because I want to give everyone a perspective that you really spent and do spend time on dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, the brain fog things that come about. We're going to that's the root of this, where it all started for you. And because recently with my father-in-law passing, who had dementia and Alzheimer's, it's a tough thing. And I know there's a lot of people who are listening out there who have had family members or maybe close people to them that have gone through this. But this was kind of the springboard and the foundation for you. And then you start your own business, right? And you really inspire the enhanced protocol, I think, at this time, correct? And you can talk through that journey. So as your background is again, the dementia, really the things that were deteriorating the brain. And now your shift that you're talking about is actually making it sharper so you don't get to that point. We're gonna unpack everything in the middle of that. But talk to our guests about that journey when you first started your business.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're listening to this, you might hear Alzheimer's and dementia. And if you don't have a family history of that, you might think, oh, why would I even listen to this? There were so many things that organically developed that allowed me to see some things that I hadn't seen before that give entrepreneurs and everyday Joes and Janes exactly what they want today And the fringe benefit is you get to have a better brain for the rest of your life. So if you hang with us in this conversation, we're going to drop a bunch of actionable tips that won't cost you anything, things based on real science that you can start doing today to have more energy, to have a better brain, to have more focus, to clear the brain fog, to be able to get home at the end of a workday and have enough gas in the tank to get on the floor and play with your kids if that's what you want to do.
Yes.
And I couldn't have predicted all of that when it started because, like you said, David, I was sort of in this space of serving people with Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, Lewy body dementia, frontotemporal degeneration, all these neurodegenerative diseases.
Yes.
And initially, my focus was on what you might call the art side of the equation, which I would describe as how do we interpersonally do better with people who see the world through the lens of a dementing illness. The paradox of something like Alzheimer's disease is that you don't remember all the stuff that you're forgetting. So in the moment, you think you're fine and you're anything but fine. And you have all these disconnects in the world. And educationally, I initially had a background in interpersonal and group communication and psychology. And I just leveraged that to come up with a whole framework for how to interact with people and how to get the environment right. And so the initial springboard for my entrepreneurial journey with the Mind for All Seasons is I've got to train family and professional caregivers how to do that kind of work. And then I had this really interesting pivot that I never could have predicted a year into it. I'm so grateful for this, but it was actually a pivot that came out of what could have been a painful experience. And it taught me a really important lesson about entrepreneurship. So about a year into the journey, I was contacted by an assisted living company out of Arizona. And they had just acquired some new properties. They hadn't been in the whole assisted living memory care game very long. And their owners reached out and said, hey, we've been referred to you as someone who has expertise in the memory care space. We want you to help us set up a whole program. We want it to be a training program, a genuine good memory care program for our residents. And so I flew down to Arizona, spent a couple of days with those guys, loved getting to know them. They were fantastic. And we ended those couple of days with a handshake agreement that I was going to spend at least a year helping them develop this program. So I thought, wow, this entrepreneurial journey it's off to an amazing start. This is great. This is going to make my year. And they said, we've got a silent partner. We've got to get his buy-in. Give us a day or two. We'll get back to you. Well, a day or two turned into 2 or 3 weeks. And I started to feel a little antsy. I hadn't heard from these guys.
Yeah.
And I literally prayed and said, hey, if this is not the right thing for me, then bless me that it won't happen. And I promise I'll be grateful. But I really want this to happen. I feel good about this. I like these guys. I want to work with them. And a couple days later, I got a phone call from Chris, one of the owners, and he said, Eric, I'm so sorry. You probably think we can't walk and chew gum at the same time. We've strung you along. Thank you for being patient. But, and I thought, oh, here it comes.
Right.
And he went on to tell me that right after I left, they got to know this nurse practitioner who had gone on to do a lot of advanced training with one of the top neurologists on the planet, a guy from UCLA who had been the founding president of the Buck Institute for Research on Aging. And this guy, Randy Vaudry, had learned some key things about how to help someone with a dementing illness actually start to reverse their symptoms to a degree. He'd gone on to apply it in a primary care practice that he had in my own state of Idaho. And he had reached out to them saying, I think I could help your residents actually do better. And when I heard this, I said, did he study with Dr. Bredesen at UCLA? And they said, yeah, how did you know that? And I said, well, I've read the research. I just didn't know anyone was starting to apply it. You should totally do that. And they said, well, we're really sorry, but we can't afford to work with you and him. So we're going to go all in and work with Randy. And I said, awesome. They said, we hope you'll stay in touch and you should call Randy. And inwardly, I'm thinking, yeah, right. I don't have time to call Randy. I just lost a huge contract. Right. I've got to hustle and grind and make this go. So, I mean, you've probably been there. You know what it is when something changes. And it would have been very easy in that moment to complain or to feel like the world was conspiring against me or that, woe is me. But honestly, I prayed again and I said, I'm so thankful. I don't know why, because I really wanted this to happen, but I'm grateful. And then I just went back to work. And 2 months later, I got a call out of the blue from this guy named Randy Vaudry, who introduced himself as this guy that was working at this community. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay, so you're the guy. And he said, they want me to train their staff because if their staff aren't well trained, they can't follow through on the things that I, as a clinician, want them to do. And I told them, I don't know how to do that. I work with people in clinic. I don't have that skill. And they said, you know a guy. You should call him.
You should call him. He's going
to. So long story short, I was headed through his part of the state the next week, excuse me. And I said, I'm coming your direction. I'm going to consult at a hospital down your way for a couple of days. I'll just drive over a little bit early. Let's get together and talk. And so I spent from 6 o'clock till after midnight in his living room one night. And wow. I will never forget him pulling out this family Bible-sized stack of research that he had amassed and all of his own case studies. And he just started walking me through the science of everything. And based on that and the fact that I'm kind of a brain nerd and I've read lots of research on it, I left that night knowing that we could make a bigger difference for people.
Yes.
And we also realized 1 and 1 is 10 in this case. So we worked together on contract for about 6 months. I like to think of it as like a 6-month date.
Uh-huh.
And eventually we woke up and we looked at each other one day and said, we're totally aligned in our mission and purpose here. We love working together. We have different skill sets that are highly complementary and synergistic. What are we doing working on contract? Let's go all in. So I offered him 50% of the business that wasn't worth anything anyway at that time.
Right.
He's like, yeah, let's do it. And, we just celebrated our 9-year anniversary.
Congratulations.
And thank you. So that moment really taught me that, when people say that what feels like a door closing is really another door opening, it's cliche, but it's so true. And
yes.
The hard things that we're going through are often just part of becoming what we need to become.
Yeah. That path is so, we use this term, my wife and I, just trust it, right? Like if something falls through, there's a path and a reasoning behind that. And it's hard sometimes. It really is to stay in the positive when something doesn't go your way, but there is a path for you. And as long as you're putting in the right intentions and like you said, you really wanted to help, you knew you were going to grow a business, you were going to help people, and you just find this path because you're intentionally trying to make a difference for people and do the right things. Things will come your way. And it wasn't that the universe was conspiring against you. It was actually conspiring with you at that time.
Yeah. 100%.
So now you've got this partnership. You've done some testing, and what comes out of that, or I'm not even going to say testing, but you're going through these, cognitive views of people who are struggling with Alzheimer's, I'm sure at that point, and you're trying to reverse it, which is unbelievable to me. What is coming out of this at this time when you decide that you are going to partner?
Yeah. So I'll describe an outcome, and then I want to go back and unpack what led to that outcome.
Okay.
So I remember one of our earliest clients, a guy named Marv, who had gone to a couple of different neurologists because he was changing. He wasn't remembering things very well. And he was starting to shift from being the happy, gregarious tease to a guy that would say very rude things to his wife. And she started realizing, hey, this is not my husband. Something's wrong here.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of different neurologists diagnosed him with dementia and said, I'm sorry, there's not much I can do for you.
Okay.
And he ended up even getting a third opinion, and same thing. And so he declined over a period of time. And finally, he was so rude and abrasive and difficult to be with that his wife it was starting to affect her health and emotional and physical well-being. So the kid said, Mom, you can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
So she moved him into the community where we were piloting and developing the enhanced protocol.
Okay.
And they hadn't even heard of it. But he got there and they started realizing, okay, maybe we should try this. And so we did a very broad panel of labs. We looked at way more than is typically looked at in a primary care visit. So we're talking nutrients and hormones and metabolic markers and inflammatory markers, et cetera. And we found all sorts of things that were not in good shape. And we started working with him and with that assisted living community to start, you might think of it as patching holes in the boat.
Okay.
We identified all these holes that were sinking his ship. And so we helped him optimize his nutrient levels. We helped him get his thyroid to a better place. We helped him with really low testosterone levels, which is also critical for memory. And as we worked through all of these things, he went from a cognitive score of 15 out of 30 to about 5 months later scoring 30 out of 30. And he moved back home with his wife. And that was the first time I ever saw someone get well enough that they could move back home. So, I mean, frame this up, if you will. I had spent 16 years helping people going through a decline that I thought was inevitable. And looking back, it was like, oh, we were straightening deck chairs on the Titanic. But what if there was a way to right the ship? Now,
Yes.
I wish that I could sit here and tell you that we have a cure for Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah.
We don't. I wish that I could tell you that 100% of people that we work with get to move back home. No, that's absolutely not the case. But the majority of people, 75 to 80-ish% of people that already have a serious disease like Alzheimer's show some level of measurable objective improvement on cognitive tests and blood tests. And if the least that we can do is level things out, that still represents a real gain.
Huge.
But, before I kind of unpack some of the actionable things that I learned from all this that anybody can be doing to feel better and have more energy and get to a better place, I'll simply say that as we worked with more and more people at this pilot location, I could not have predicted what organically would come out of that. And in retrospect, I should have seen it coming, but you know how it is. It's hindsight's 20/20 is the cliche.
Sure.
What happened is that as we helped those residents get better, their adult children started coming to us saying, hey, you just helped my mom add 5 points on a 30-point cognitive test in a matter of a few months. And she has Alzheimer's disease. And if you can do that with my mom, surely you could help me, because I was in a car wreck 2 years ago. I've never been the same since. My thoughts feel like they're ping pong balls bouncing around. I can't focus to save my life, and I haven't been able to sleep ever since. Could you help me get my brain to a better place? And we said, well, we can't promise anything, but theoretically, yeah, it should be helpful because we're looking at root cause issues related to brain health. And so we went all into helping those adult kids, and we found that they had better results. They were younger, they were in a healthier state as it was, and so they actually responded even better. And then that led to adults saying, well, what could you do for my teenager with suicidal tendencies or with anxiety or depression or ADHD? Or, hey, I've got a son that's in college and he plays football. I think you played football, didn't you, David? And
yes, I did.
My son plays football and he just got his bell rung again really hard, diagnosed with yet another concussion. And I'm really worried about that. What could you do? And so that just led to going out and getting a lot more advanced training and fellowships on traumatic brain injury and post-concussion syndrome and hyperbaric medicine and all of these different skills that we've pulled into a toolbox. And it's all just morphed into helping people of all different ages get their brain to a really optimal state.
Yes, because you've laid down the foundation. And now this is where I want to dig into this. Okay. Mm-hmm. This is amazing. Okay. Optimizing brain function and the enhanced protocol that you've created, you've translated this over, like you said, to athletes, to people who are trying to become better performers in the business space. I mean, everything top to bottom. But for listeners who want to optimize their brain health today, okay, let's give them some nuggets here. What are 3 habits they could start right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let's talk about 3 foundational things that you can't really medicate or supplement your way out of, because a lot of people just want a quick solution. And I'm sorry, I don't make the rules in life. I just try to interpret them. And if you think that there's a quick fix to optimal health, then you're probably listening to the wrong podcast. But if you want to know what actually will get you to a better place, here's some things that are really backed by science. If you went for 24 hours without food, nothing bad would happen. In fact, some good things would happen, and we could talk about that later. But just consider that fact. If you went for a day without exercise, well, I bet everybody's done that. Nothing bad happens.
Right.
But what happens if you go for 24 hours without sleep? You're wrecked. You're totally ruined. So if I had to pick one lifestyle factor that really matters, I would start with sleep.
Okay.
Sleep is not for the weak. Sleep is not something that you get to do after you've been grinding for a few years and you've got your company scaled up and you're looking for the buyer so that you can exit and go sit on the beach. Sleep is absolutely crucial for optimal performance. And here's why. And we have only known it, at least for sure, since about 2014.
Really?
Sleep is when a system in the body that we hadn't even proven exists until 2014 starts to operate. And this is a system called the glymphatic system. So, David, you've heard of the lymphatic system. It's like the sewer of the body. That's an oversimplification. But researchers have known for a long time that lymphatic system does not actually get past the blood-brain barrier and go up into the brain. And they've thought, well, how does the brain clear waste and debris and everything that's produced just from living and running the cellular engine? And they theorized there's got to be some mechanism for that. But it was finally proven in about 2014, and we've come to learn more and more about it ever since, that when we're asleep, the brain will shrink a little bit and the fluid-filled spaces, the ventricles, open up, and the body makes about 1.5 cups of new cerebrospinal fluid, and it bathes the brain in that fluid. And there's sort of a pumping action when we're in really deep sleep, assuming that we're sleeping well and cycling through all the stages of sleep. There's this pumping action that occurs that just sort of pumps up things like amyloid beta protein, which clumps up and forms the sticky plaques in the Alzheimer's brain. It pumps it up and into that cerebrospinal fluid and flushes it out into the lymphatic system so we can eliminate it like we do all of our waste. So if you're getting less than 7 hours of good, deep, restful sleep.
I was going to ask, 7 hours. You want at least 7.
Yeah, 7 to, the averages are, most people need 7 to 9 hours to be really optimal. If you're getting less than that, then you're not running the clean cycle enough times throughout the night. And you might get away with that for a short time. I know when I was in my 20s, I burnt the candle at both ends and I did stupid things like procrastinating the college paper that I had to write. And I was up all night trying to get it done. And I told myself, I can totally do this. Well, you can't get away with something like that forever.
Yeah.
And if you want really optimal performance, you just have to sleep. So there are actionable things that people can do to optimize their sleep, starting with just prioritizing it. Because some people sleep just fine. They just need to make it a priority. So,
and the consistency,
is there anything
right?
there that stands out to you?
Consistency going to bed. It's trying to be disciplined enough to go to bed at a certain time, wake up at a certain time. Hydration. I'm not going to get into any other things, but the ability to get sleep is a huge one. And if I don't sleep, I'm a mess. I really am. I'm just not on point. Yeah.
So maybe a short list of what we would call sleep hygiene. Like how let's say you're committed to sleeping, but you really want to optimize the experience. Well, you've got to be in sync with your circadian rhythms. And in the last umpteen decades, we've had artificial light that's disrupted the way that humans have functioned for the rest of human existence. And so we've got to appreciate the differences. And it might surprise some people to find out that a really good night's sleep actually starts the morning before. And it's based on our physiology. The eye has certain receptors in them, melanopsin receptors, that are very sensitive to blue wavelengths of light. And so earlier generations of humans didn't have artificial lighting, and they didn't have indoor plumbing. So the first thing that most people did in the morning was to go out when the sun got up and go find a place to use the bathroom. And those blue wavelengths of light would hit the receptors in the eye. And the consequence of that is it literally sets a little tiny part of the brain that's about the size of half of a chocolate chip, the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And all you need to know is that is the body clock. And it sets the body clock and it primes it to sort of go off about 12 hours later and release this cascade of hormonal effects that prepare the body for good, deep, restful sleep. So if you can get out in the morning in the first 15 to 30 minutes after you wake up and spend a little bit of time outside setting the body clock, it's surprisingly helpful. And if you have to get up before the sun, then get yourself a seasonal affective disorder light, a happy light, some people call them. They're like $30 to $70 on Amazon. And just set that next to you for the first 15 to 30 minutes of the day. Sometimes I'll set it on my bathroom counter while I'm shaving in the morning and just let that light set the body clock. So as you get toward the end of the day, if you've been moving throughout the day and moving lymph through your system, it actually improves how the glymphatic system functions. So that ties into another tip we can talk about related to physical activity. But then as it gets later, if you can give yourself an hour to an hour and a half before the time that you're going to bed, where you have a shutdown routine. And what that looks like is you go around, you start turning off about 50% of the lights in your house. You start dimming things naturally. You start avoiding screens so that you don't have those blue wavelengths of light coming into your eye anymore, because the light from screens will suppress melatonin production. And we don't want to do that. When the sun goes down, you get a lot of red and pink wavelengths. That stimulates melatonin production. So you got to cut the blue light. Bring it down. At the very least, wear your blue light blocking glasses. And a lot of people have probably heard that tip. But then start cutting off your hydration a couple hours before bed so that you're less likely to be up urinating. And have this calming shutdown routine where you're doing things that aren't overstimulating and you're just signaling to the body, hey, it's time for good, deep, restful sleep. Make sure that your room is super dark. A lot of people are way more sensitive to even little bits of light than they think. So get your blackout curtains, wear a sleep mask if you have to. Make sure that your room is cold, because that colder temperature actually signals the body that it's time to sleep. And if you can crack the window and get some fresh air so that you keep the balance in the air appropriate and you don't have CO2 building up, it actually really helps to contribute to good, deep, restful sleep. So those are a few tips that I throw out there.
Those are great tips. All right. What's the second thing that somebody can do?
Well, I was talking about exercise earlier.
Yes.
And every research study that's ever been done on exercise and brain health shows that it's deeply beneficial for a lot of different reasons. Exercise improves blood flow. And you can't have a better brain without really good blood flow. That would be like expecting your business to be good without cash flow. It just doesn't work. So you've got to ensure really good blood flow and get the oxygen going to the brain. And a quick public service announcement about that. A ton of people have undiagnosed sleep apnea. It's shocking how many people are not getting enough oxygen to the brain at night. You would never allow someone to put their hands around your neck and just squeeze for 8 hours a day. But that's what's happening when someone has undiagnosed sleep apnea. It's like the equivalent physiologically of having a concussion every night of your life. It wrecks your brain. That one risk factor will double your Alzheimer's risk long term. So what do you do? Well, everybody's primary care doctor should have an overnight oximetry device that you could borrow for a night, and it could measure your oxygen levels at night and see if you're doing well. It's a good thing to rule out. Even if you're thin and you don't have the stereotypical really thick neck and you don't fit the stereotype of someone that just snores like a chainsaw, good to screen for that. Or you could wear a whoop ring or an Aura ring or some of these wearables. And track your sleep. That's at least a decent screening tool. Or stick out your tongue and say, ah. And if the back of your throat is obstructed and you can't see your airway at the back of the throat, you're actually way more likely to have sleep apnea. I've seen 95-pound women that have terrible sleep apnea that's gone undiagnosed just because their tongue is bigger relative to the size of the back of their throat.
Wow.
So that's a super easy thing. Anybody could just look in the mirror and
Yeah.
do that. I guarantee most people listening to this are probably looking for a mirror, checking it out. So back to exercise. Okay, that gets blood flowing. Exercise, though, also stimulates a hormone called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which
Okay.
is often described as being like miracle grow for brain cells. It's a growth factor that stimulates production of neurons. That's really beneficial to people. The other thing that exercise does, especially strength training, is it allows us to maintain muscle mass as we age.
Yes.
Most of us, by the time we hit 45 or 50, start losing some muscle mass. Well, why does that impact us? Two big reasons. Number one, having good muscle mass is the difference between being able to get up out of bed or on and off the toilet by yourself versus having to pay somebody to assist you with that.
Yeah.
So it means independence. Number two, muscle has a really high concentration of mitochondria, which we all learned in high school biology, the powerhouse of the cell. And all of these brain health problems are a problem of energetics. There is low energy output. The brain is an absolute energy hog. For all the calories that we consume, the brain uses 25 to 30% of those to produce energy. And it weighs a fraction of the rest of the body. So it is a literal energy hog. And if we lose muscle mass, we're losing a high percentage of mitochondria. And so our total body energy output really drops and it affects us. So I know a lot of people try to exercise because they want to look good in a swimsuit. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But I exercise because I want my heart to be strong and I want my brain to be strong and I want my body to be strong so that as I age, I'm more resilient and I get better results today and tomorrow.
Such a great point. And, I had this conversation with my wife about a week ago, and we've had it before, but I work out religiously in the morning. I probably take one day off a week. And then every now and again, if my schedule where I have an early meeting, like if I don't do it early, I just don't do it. I'm just conditioned that way. So if I have an early meeting, I don't get my workout in. And it's the days when I don't get my workout in, I feel like I'm on third gear. Like I worked out this morning, man. I am on fifth gear right now. I am I am sharp. I am ready to go. I'm rocking and rolling. Like I'm at a fifth gear level. When I don't work out, I feel like I'm at a third or a second gear level. I just don't speak as clearly. My brain's not firing. I feel a literal difference in my performance because just in conversation with people and in reading or whatever I'm doing at that point. And I think that, and I was having this conversation, I said, there's so many people out there who just don't take physical fitness seriously. And they've just run at this low level for so long. They just don't know the difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, such a good point. But do you mind if I put on my coach's hat here and walk you through what helps with that? Because, we work with members all over the United States.
Yeah.
And, I'll share with your listeners a way that they can get access to more tips and help and strategy. We've got a special bonus that you and I put together for them. But,
yes. So listen in at the end because we're going to have a bonus for you.
So my team and I have had to coach thousands of people through this. And we've also learned more. And what we've learned, and I mean this with all the respect in the world, David, but you're doing what a lot of people aren't doing. You're prioritizing physical activity. You're having a good workout at the start of the day. That's amazing. And I want to celebrate that.
Okay.
But what the research is increasingly showing is a lot of people do exactly what you're doing, and they could be described as an active couch potato. Because if you exercise for 30 to 60 minutes first thing in the morning, and then you sit the rest of the day, you lose so many of the physiological benefits. So you're gaining a ton from that workout. Please keep that going. That's amazing.
Sure.
But to your point, if you miss the workout, then it's like, well, I'm into the workday. What do I do? And it feels like, oh, I totally missed out on something and I'm not doing well. Reality, though, is if you have the workout and then you sit all day, you're actually in almost as much trouble, because the longer we go with sitting, the more our insulin sensitivity diminishes and other things happen at the cellular level that aren't so good. So here's the workaround, and it actually gets you better results, and it's easier even than what you've been doing.
Talk
It's
to me.
called exercise snacking. So if you can get up once an hour, maximum every hour and a half, and just spend 3 to 5 minutes with an intense focus on physical activity,
Okay.
and you do that throughout the day, then periodically throughout the day, you're doing exactly what the human body was meant to do. Sitting should actually be the exception, not the rule. And in the modern world, it's become the reverse.
Yes.
So what do? We get up, and this doesn't have to cost you a gym membership and a whole bunch of time. I literally get up from the desk, and I've got a spin bike in my office. I might go crank away for 5 minutes and make sure that the last 30 to 60 seconds, I'm dialing up the intensity. And it's like I'm doing a hill repeat, and I'm cranking away and getting my heart rate really going. And then I just take some breaths. I do a little bit of breath work, and I either sit back down or I have a standing desk, and I'm up, down all day long. You could jog in place. You could do jumping jacks. You could jump a fake rope and just stand there and jump up and down. You could go walk around your office building several times.
Squats.
You could go up and down stairs.
Yeah.
Do air squats. Whatever it is, there's actually most likely more benefit from what we can see if you're consistently doing that all day long, and you're having these periods of intense activity,
Yes.
and then followed by rest. We think that it's probably better than the 30 to 60 minute workout first thing in the morning. Ideally, you would do it all. You
Sure.
do the workout in the morning, have a concentrated effort to build some muscle mass and to build cardiovascular endurance, but then you'd have exercise snacks throughout the day.
I love that.
If we can
Exercise
cut the
snack.
excuses
I like
in our
it.
own minds, it's like, okay, well, yeah, I can take 3 minutes and do something once an hour.
I'm hitting my exercise snack here right after our interview. So
Love it. That's awesome, David.
It's great insight, because everybody thinks that, oh, I got to go to the gym, right? Or I got to go do this. That is such a great perspective, because you just don't have to do that. And think about it, right? You do that 5 times a day. You add 60 minutes. I mean, that's 30-minute workout, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Great insight.
So we talked about, or you had asked,
Yeah.
hey, what are 3 tips? And
3 tips. So we talked about sleep first, talked about exercise.
right. So the
Give me three.
last one that I have to mention is what we're eating. A lot of people still don't realize that in medical circles, Alzheimer's disease is often referred to as diabetes of the brain. And in one way or another, most of the worst chronic diseases that we have, things like heart disease, type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, they tie into metabolic health. And most people hear metabolism and they think weight gain, weight loss. They think, oh, I look at a box of Krispy Kremes and I gain 10 pounds, kind of a thing.
Right.
That's a really simplistic view of metabolism. What we're actually talking about with metabolism is, how is the cellular engine functioning? And we want to keep it functioning optimally. So what we eat really matters. I've seen hundreds of people eat their way out of type 2 diabetes by just dealing with the problem, which is, they're constantly provoking an insulin response. And so their insulin levels are climbing because the body's working harder and harder and harder all the time just to be able to deliver sugar to the cells. Everybody knows, or at least intuitively knows, that elevated blood sugar is really damaging.
Yes.
A lot of people have had a family member or a friend who is a diabetic that maybe went blind or lost a limb because elevated blood sugar damages tissue. Elevated blood sugar is one of the most significant risk factors for heart attack or a stroke. So everybody wants to know, okay, well, just tell me, what's the perfect diet? Am I supposed to eat a vegan diet? Am I supposed to eat vegetarian? Am I supposed to eat keto or carnivore or whatever? There's a ton of tribalism with diets. And when we work with our members at A Mind for All Seasons, we're often working with a lot of different dietary strategies because there are tools in the toolbox. And what I found to be more helpful is to leverage principles. And we don't have time to go into all the principles that we could talk about, but I'll give you just a few.
And there's one I want to touch on, okay? But go ahead, please. Go.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe the first principle for people to recognize is that food is fuel. And I realize that food is wrapped up in a lot of our celebrations, and it's become part of our culture, and we're marketed heavily based on big food and what they put out there to people. There are all sorts of commercials about food, but food is fuel. And you would never pull up to the gas station with your diesel truck and try to put regular gasoline in it. You'd wreck the engine. Everybody knows that. When it comes to how the body's functioning, we need to ask ourselves, well, what kind of fuel do I need? And that ties into the second principle, which is, what is my goal?
Yeah.
So let me give you an example of how that comes into play. I mentioned earlier that when I first started this entrepreneurial journey, I was 30 pounds overweight, and I tried to exercise my way out of that, and it was an abject failure because exercise doesn't do as much as shifting your diet at affecting your weight. Insulin is the hormone of growth and storage. So if your insulin is up, you're in storage mode, and your body will take whatever sugar it can't store as glycogen in the muscles, and your liver will convert it to triglycerides and sort of pack it around your midsection. And isn't it great that we get to store our fat around our center of gravity? Can you imagine if we had fat on our shoulders and we got to pack around our excess fuel? But the body hates to waste. And so if we have excess, the body will save it for later in terms of fat storage. Most of us don't access that secondary storage. We're just perpetually provoking an insulin response. And I came to know, I've got to quit doing that. Well, what doesn't provoke an insulin response? Well, if you eat an avocado, which is just a bunch of fat and fiber, if you're eating an avocado, there's zero insulin response. If you eat a can of olives, zero insulin response. Protein has a very minor insulin response in most cases. So I realized, I've got to eat things like cruciferous vegetables that don't have high level of carbohydrates. They've got lots and lots of fiber in them. I've got to eat good, healthy fats. And so I used a ketogenic diet as a tool, and I dropped 30 pounds in about 2 to 2.5 months without trying. And I had a shoulder injury at the time, and I wasn't exercising.
Such a great point. And I want to touch on this. Okay. I got to ask you this question. I want your perspective because for years, I remember growing up, if you're going to do eggs, do egg whites. Okay. Mm-hmm. Don't eat fat. Limit, trim this off, trim that off. Fat is bad for you. Fat is bad for you. Yes. Fat is bad for you if it's not the right fat. I want to talk about the right fats because steak, and remember through the years, don't eat red meat. Red meat's not good for you. No, that is and this is your perspective. I'm just telling you my perspective, but I want your professional perspective. Your brain needs fat, right? To it's a good thing to have the fat. It's just when you're putting all the sugars and everything else on top of it, that's where it really can be damaging. But fat is a good thing for you. And I heard this recently, but they set these cholesterol levels years ago. And what reality of these cholesterol, there's good fat. It's okay to have a little bit of cholesterol in your diet. And talk to me about that, because I feel like for years it was don't eat red meat, always do egg whites. And I think that has totally shifted, but I want your perspective on that.
Yeah. Well, at the outset, I have to say, we could literally talk all day and still not exhaust this subject.
I know.
I'll try to give you a few nuggets here that are helpful.
But I love it.
Number one, you're really talking about another dietary principle. And I think it's one that even with all of the influencers and scientists that are out there going on shows and talking about these things, a lot of people don't point this out. And so I want to call it to the surface. And that is that you made the statement, David, that, if you're eating steak and eggs, but then you have sugar on top of it, that's where the problem is. to put a finer point on that, we need to remember that food is dependent on context.
Okay.
It's a completely different thing metabolically to have a hamburger patty with the bun than it is to have a hamburger patty wrapped in a lettuce leaf.
Yes.
Why? Well, because when you pair all that carbohydrate with the fat and protein, you get a very different metabolic response. And when you have high levels of sugar, you end up with a high level of triglycerides. And when a triglyceride is removed of its fat stores, what you're left with is a small, dense, oxidized, damaged lipid particle. The LDL on a cholesterol panel that gets labeled quote unquote bad cholesterol, that's naive. And a lot more cardiologists and other researchers are recognizing, no, there are all sorts of different cholesterol particles, and the body makes LDL for a reason. And there's a difference between healthy LDL that's helping to shuttle fats around the body if we're using fat as a fuel source. Like if you're in a fasted state and you're not eating, well, your body's going to make more LDL to shuttle that fat around.
Yes.
That is very different than small, dense, oxidized LDL, which happens when you have a really high carbohydrate diet. So there is a lot of context involved here. I think you were also hinting at the fact that cholesterol has been unfairly demonized. And cholesterol is essential for life. We would die without cholesterol. Most of the cholesterol that our bodies have is produced endogenously, which means in the body. And there's plenty of research showing that eating dietary cholesterol doesn't do that much to change your own cholesterol levels. So what we need to be careful of is damaged cholesterol. I see cholesterol panels on people every day. We do lots of blood work with people. And I can tell you, it's totally different to have someone that has really low HDL, which is usually called the good cholesterol.
Yeah,
if you have really low HDL, super high triglycerides, and really high LDL, that's like the widowmaker waiting to happen.
That's bad.
It's completely different if you have high HDL, low triglycerides, and modestly elevated LDL. So again, we could go off in the weeds there, but food is context dependent. So okay, if I circle back to the idea of, hey, I lost a bunch of weight. I used a ketogenic diet as a tool to do that.
Yeah.
But what do you do after that?
Yeah. Hold on. I want to ask you one more thing though about
Sure.
And again, this is just because I'm into this stuff, but statins, rosuvastatin, they actually bring your cholesterol down. And I've heard this, and this is just your professional opinion. I know we're just talking here like guys, but I've heard that it actually, if you're on these statins continuously through years and years and years, it could promote dementia. Is there any truth to that, or what's your feeling on that?
Yeah, and there is some truth to that. There are some warnings with statin drugs that they can cause cognitive issues. I've certainly seen clients who are living with dementia who come off of a statin drug and they start doing a lot better. There's a book called Lipitor, Thief of Memory, written by a NASA astronaut who came back from a mission in space, had his regular checkup. His cholesterol had bumped over 200. And based on the algorithm, his doctor put him on Lipitor, one of the statins there is. It may have been the first, but his memory just tanked and he lost his job. And then he realized, wait a minute, there was a med change.
Okay.
Now, I have to say, there is a place for statin drugs. They do some really good things. Statistically, they're not very good at preventing the first heart attack or stroke. They are better at secondary prevention. So if you recently had a heart attack or stroke, that may be a time where there is more of a place. Or if you had a stent placed, that's where the research starts to look a little bit better on it. There are also different types of statins. Some that are less likely to cause problems than others.
Okay.
So I'm not trying to give specific medical advice here, but this is a thread that some people might want to pull on. In general, I think that statins are grossly overprescribed and that we're too hung up on one biomarker, meaning cholesterol, and we're not doing enough to pay attention to the fact that the body is a system of systems and everything works together. And I've seen people have way more significant improvements in the health of their cholesterol panel from making dietary shifts and getting at the root cause issue than I've seen from using a statin drug.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Sorry,
if
I
you
got
look
to
at
ask
how,
that. And I know I got you off track, but I'm totally into this stuff. I was on statin for a long time and I got off it about a year ago. And I'm coming up for my annual, so I'm going to see how everything's going. And but I want to go back to the diet. So I know you're, and this is great conversation. This is fantastic.
well, I could nerd out about this all day, and that's kind of, one of the reasons that we created an online membership site is to have a safe place where people can come and ask questions and have like online office hours where they can just show up and bring a question like you've asked and say, hey, well, what about this? And we just point them to the research and try to help them understand what's actually out there and cut through some of the noise of all the influencers in the world.
Yeah.
So I was talking about eating based on goals, that's a really important principle. And my goal early on was to improve my own metabolic health and to lose the weight and to get back to a better place. And early on, I realized my pancreas was working overtime because I had been eating too much carbohydrate on a consistent basis. Yeah. And so my fasting insulin level had gone up, which is why I couldn't lose the weight. Well, once I shifted using a ketogenic diet, I felt so good, so much more energized that I kept going on that ketogenic diet for another 6 months. And then I realized, wait a minute, there's a risk side to this. Every extreme dietary intervention can be a helpful tool in the right context, but it has a risk side. And one of the risks of a ketogenic diet, aside from the fact that it's hard to maintain long-term.
And explain, hold on, I'm going to cut in. For everyone who's listening who might not know what a ketogenic diet is, just really simple, quick, explain to them who's going, what's ketogenic?
Ketogenic diet was invented in 1924 by researchers who were studying epilepsy patients, and they realized epileptics do not tend to have seizures if they're not eating, if they're fasted. Yeah. And they realized they can't fast forever. But a diet that mimics the fasting state is a diet that does not provoke an insulin response. Well, I mentioned earlier, fat does not have, there's no insulin response to fat. And so a ketogenic diet is about 75% of your total caloric intake coming from fat, about 20% from protein, and then about 5% from carbohydrate, mostly in the form of vegetables.
Which I believe in.
I was eating that way and it was serving me really well. But then I started realizing some of the downside of it. Well, I don't want to lose muscle mass. And in general, you need an insulin response to build muscle. Muscle cells have insulin receptors on them, and that's the hormone of growth and storage. So I shifted. I realized I love how I feel during the workday when my sugars are nice and steady. But I want to preserve muscle mass. So like on a Saturday morning, it's common for me to go out and run 5 or so miles and come back and lift weights for 45 to 60 minutes. Yeah. And I need a big recovery meal after that. And so I'll eat something like a bowl of rice and maybe some chicken thighs, or I might have 4 scrambled eggs with some cheese. And I might have carbohydrate in the form of a nice apple, or I might have some more rice with that, or something else. I might have a potato. Whatever sounds good in the moment, I try to have a natural whole food kind of source of carbohydrate, and I pair it with protein because that's a recipe for building muscle. And if you time it 30 to 60 minutes after the workout, it's completely different than if I was to eat that meal 4 hours later. And I know from wearing a continuous glucose monitor from time to time and looking at my own body's response to it, that I just feel and function really well if I have a recovery meal like that. So now, most work days, I eat very ketogenically during the workday, and then I liberalize my diet a little bit in the evening. I might have some roasted potatoes. I might have some black rice, or modest amount of carbohydrate, but I'm eating real food, which is another principle. Whatever you do, eat real food. And even all the tribalists in the dietary world agree that ultra-processed food is an abject failure of an experiment. It's wrecked our health. And if you do nothing else except to cut out sodas and other ultra-processed food, they
Yes.
are chemistry experiments masquerading as food. If you cut all of that stuff out, you're just flat going to do better.
Yep. And I think Kennedy's making a real, Robert F. Kennedy's making a real movement on this. And it's almost like back in, gosh, what was that? Maybe the 2000s, or maybe it was the 90s, when the tobacco industry was kind of under fire. He's putting the processed food companies under fire right now, and rightly so. I totally believe in that, because you are not only living proof of this, but you study this day in and day out for people who just need to really enhance their brain either function, or they're at a state where, they may be losing their memory at this point, or their cognition just kind of is dropping. And diet is a big part of this. And I think it's a huge conversation. And I love that we're diving into this. I really do.
Yeah. Just a quick story about how powerful it is. One division of my company still works with assisted living, memory care, and skilled nursing facilities. And one of the things that we ultimately help them do is to change how they're feeding their residents. Because right now, most communities do use a lot of processed foods, and they have a very carb-centric kind of meal plan.
Because it's
and
cheap.
Because
it's cheap, right?
And sometimes it's not cheap, but sometimes they brag about the fact that they've got the ice cream parlor open 24/7. And if you want to have ice cream for breakfast, great, we'll give it to your loved one. And that sounds great on the surface. If you have a child's mentality, kids want to eat dessert all the time. And it's only been recently that adults have kind of jumped on the bandwagon with the kids, and we've started acting like children, thinking that, we should have cookies at every meal, and that's somehow a good idea. It used to be, when you and I were kids, our parents said, no, you'll spoil your dinner. You can't have dessert right now. So that's a problem. But as we help communities make that shift, it's remarkable what happens. I think of a community in a little town, about 2 hours outside of Boise, Idaho, where I live. And they didn't want to go all in doing blood work and testing things that were more measurable. They wanted to focus on just the diet. And the only thing that they did was to start feeding their residents real food, really reducing carbohydrates, prioritizing more protein for their residents, getting them lots more vegetables that they cooked fresh. And in a very short period of time, they saw things like one male resident that could not walk hardly from the dining area to the living room, that was just a short walk away. And within a couple of weeks of shifting his diet, he was doing laps around the building, and he had no physical therapy. There was no other change, no med changes, nothing. All they did was change his diet. That's how impactful it is for people. And it's time that we do more of that for ourselves and for people that we really care about.
It's huge. It's huge. Listen, Eric, I would like to ask you this, because there's so much more that I want to get to. And on the performance side of people who may not be doing it the way they want to be doing it, and leading teams and talking about, we didn't even get to the idea of the hard drive versus the software. And I would like to ask you this. Can we do another show, a continuation, and unpack that a lot more and dig into that? Because I think now we've gotten the background and the foundation and the things that people can start doing right now who are not performing optimally, or her thinking. Now, again, this is future forward thinking, right? When I'm 75 and I'm 85, I want to be functioning with my grandkids. I want to be functioning with my kids. I want to be at a point where I am not in a position where I am not functioning. And that's why I'm doing the things that I'm doing today for the future. I'm making the sacrifices now so I don't have to sacrifice later. But I would love to have you back on and really dig into the hardware and the software of this. if you'd allow that.
Yeah, absolutely. I would be honored to do that. There are even other foundational principles that we didn't have time to touch on
Yes,
today because
sure,
the
sure.
three that we picked are three really big holes in the boat. But we can talk about blood markers that you could check. We could talk about things, other
Yes.
things that you can't medicate or supplement your way out of. And to frame it as the hardware software discussion, a lot of my friends are entrepreneurs and they go to business masterclasses and they read books all the time. And at some point I woke up and realized that is software. And I was talking to a client who was really trying to be more productive, but I worked with him to help him get his brain to a better place. We identified all sorts of root cause issues that were not addressed. And once his brain started operating better, and on a very objective cognitive test that's been administered over 20 million times the last 2 decades, we watched his processing speed go up by 30%. And this is a normal functioning guy. But when it went up 30%, he said, Eric, I thought that I needed to study David Allen's book on productivity more or go to another business class on productivity. And I realized, no, I just needed to get the hardware working better. I need to get the processing speed up 30%. So in the next episode, let's really dig into exactly what you have to do to accomplish that. Because if you can get the brain working better, then all of those books that you're reading, all the podcasts you're listening to, all the skills that you're developing through your great experience just flat work better in the same way that when you buy a brand new computer and you load the new software on, somehow it just runs really cleanly and it's kind of nice.
I love it. I'd be honored to have you back on to do this and do a part 2. Now, before we leave, okay, let's talk about the special offer you're going to give to the listeners right now and get them some starting access here, please.
Yeah, thank you. So, in the process of scaling this and trying to figure out how do we get to millions of people, one of the things that we realized is people need a really good source of information. They need community. They need a place where they can come and even bring blood work from their doctor's office and say, could you explain this to me? Because the doctor only had 7 minutes with me.
Yeah.
So we created an online membership site that we wanted to make it like having a Costco membership where it's dirt cheap to have the membership compared to the value that you get in the site. But it also is an access point to other stuff if you need other stuff. But on our membership site, every member gets access to online office hours where you can come on a Zoom call with me or with Randy, our medical director, or with other members of the team, and you can ask questions, just like you've been asking me today, David. And we will go through as many questions as we possibly can in that allotted office hour. So it's kind of like a college professor that has open office hours. We also do a regular masterclass where we'll take a topic like some of our members a couple of weeks ago were asking a ton of questions about nicotine and the research on using synthetic nicotine in Parkinson's patients. And we said, great, we'll dig into the research. We'll unpack it for you. We'll help explain situations where maybe that's warranted, but all the stuff to be aware of and cut through kind of the hype that's out there. So we do that for people on a consistent basis.
So good.
And the membership site costs $25 a month. But for your listeners, we wanted to do something really special. So if you go to amindforallseasons with an S, .com/join, if you put in the promo code unfinished, so the name of the podcast is Unfinished Business. Just put in unfinished under promo code. You'll get 30 days of a free trial. And if it's valuable, if you meet great people and you enjoy the networking and you enjoy getting to ask questions and learn from the recorded content and you like using the app that goes with it, you can continue your membership. There's no contract, no obligation.
Yeah. And say that one more time. We're going to put it up on the screen here.
Sure. It's amindforallseasons.com/join and use the promo code unfinished.
Unfinished. That's it right there. All right, Eric, this has been, there was so much more and I can't, that's why we got to do episode 2. We're going to, now we've got the foundation. We're going to start taking that foundation and laying it into a lot of your strategies and helping professionals become more optimal. Personal, not only just professionally, but also personally. This carries over. I mean, it just carries over. So I just every time we talk, I just really enjoy the conversation. I appreciate you being here, and the show is getting such success from guests like you, and I appreciate it. So everybody out there, wealth, health, success to all of you. Stay clear and stay aware of episode 2 because it's coming out here, and we are going to keep unpacking this. And Eric, thanks again.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Unfinished Business Podcast Show with your host, David Sliman.